Tech.mn CTO Spotlight brought to you by Livefront. I'm Jack Stark and I'm here with my co-host Nels Peterson. And today we are welcoming the CTO of Hoonuit, Shivani Stumpf. Welcome, Shivani.
Thank you so much, Jack, and nice to see you again, Nels. Excited to be here.
So we're just going to kick it off, starting about your journey. Can you tell us where you've been and how you got to where you are today?
I'd love to, Jack, but before I do that, I just wanted to give a huge shout out to Tech.mn. I've been a follower and a part of the community, the Tech.mn community, I think since the day I landed in Minnesota. I cannot say enough good things about what you guys are doing for the community. And Nels, with your background in Beta.mn, I think both TechMN and Beta.mn have been instrumental, I think, in shaping what our tech community is here in Minnesota today. So thank you guys for everything that you're doing. And thank you for hosting the CTO Spotlights. I watch all of them, and it's great that we can do this. So a little bit about my background. I'm currently the CTO at Hoonuit. I've been with the company for about 2.5 years. We're high growth mode. We're owned by 2 private equity companies. And I'll share more about Hoonuit. But prior to joining the company, I worked as Senior Director of Product Management at SPS Commerce. They're the Wall Street darling here in Minnesota, and one of our very big success stories. Prior to that, I was at Sport Engine, which also has had, or now called Sports Engine, that has had amazing amount of success. And prior to that, I worked with Ryan and Rob Weber at NativeX. I started off my career as a software developer. In fact, came to Minnesota 15 years ago to do my master's. And the reason why I landed up in Minnesota was I applied to, one of my friends at the time asked me to apply to St. Cloud State in addition to all the other schools that I'd applied to for my master's program. And W3I, they were known as W3I, formerly known as W3I at the time, NativeX was. They got a hold of my resume and they said if I come work for them, they'll give me an internship and they'll pay for me to go to school. So I have a tremendous amount of respect, and I'm so grateful to Ryan and Rob, who've been, again, instrumental in our tech community over here. And they were the ones that gave me a jump start in my career. So I came here as a developer. I got done with my master's. I worked for W3I for 7 years. I think I played every single role there, right from developer. I got into management. I had a transition. They gave me a really cool opportunity to transition into product management. I didn't quite know what I was doing at the time, but it was one of the best things I think that happened to me. And then from there, I went on to Sport Engine, where I was responsible again for both product and tech. And I think that's been really unique for me in my career. And I'm really thankful for all the opportunities over here that have allowed me to channel both my tech background and my product management background. Working at Sport Engine, then I transitioned to SPS, which was, one of those, I keep calling it rocket ship opportunities. Absolute phenomenal leadership team, doing amazing things. Learned a lot from that team. Was responsible for product strategy there. And then I transitioned to working with the chief operating officer on some key projects, which gave me tons of really, really good hands-on business experience, which was, I think, then instrumental in my next opportunity, which is now, my role here at Hoonuit. So that's a little bit about my background.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. That is really fun to hear. And I didn't know we know each other, and I didn't even know your whole background. That's cool to hear that it started in St. Cloud. I'm kind of curious. So you've been in different kind of leadership capacities at different size companies, different types of companies. And I think what's kind of interesting is NativeX Sports Engine, they were venture funded. Then you go to SPS, that's a public company, and then to Hoonuit, which is private equity backed. Well, I'm kind of curious, what are the nuances and what are the differences there? What elements and objectives were you seeing from each of those different companies?
Yeah, that's a great question, Nels. First off, I'll say that, in my experience, again, like you said, working with businesses with such different ownership structures, what's been consistent, I guess, across all of these businesses, which I would say each one of them has been really well-run business, and I've been fortunate to work at companies that are well-run businesses. I think they all are centered around, maximizing value for customers, their employees, and shareholders. So I would say that, that's consistent. It doesn't matter what your ownership structure looks like, that's been consistent. I think what the differences I've seen are probably in terms of where the company is in terms of its growth and maturity, both as it relates to, especially, with the lens I have, both as it relates to product market fit, business model, and horizon. Of course, all companies, most tech companies, I should say, are focused on growth. So I don't think it's fair to call one company as a high growth versus not, because I think all of them are.
Mm-hmm.
But I think the phase that the company is in is probably more indicative of how they run their businesses, what's priority, how decisions are made. So, as an example, when I first joined Hoonuit, we were in the process of turning around the businesses. So we were a combination of two businesses. One business unit focused on professional development for educators, the other business focused on analytics. And we were in the process of, consolidating the acquisitions that had just happened, rationalizing those acquisitions from a product, go-to-market, tech perspective, and then figuring out our business model and our product strategy. So that was 2.5 years ago. Made tons of progress since then. And of course, through that journey, we've hence acquired, we did 3 acquisitions last year. We divested one business that we had acquired. There were 2 parts of that business, so we divested one. And then we just divested another business earlier this year, or actually 4 weeks ago. So, that pace at which we've done those things at Hoonuit, I would say at SPS, they probably do similarly, at least one acquisition a year. But of course, the structure that you have, the infrastructure that you have, an organizational structure to support activities like that, of course, at a $300 million business looks really different than a small company, in terms of, how some of these changes need to happen. So I would say, those things are more indicative, I think, of the differences that you would see. I think it's probably less about ownership structure because, every company, regardless of ownership, like I said, is after, the same outcomes for the most part.
Yeah, that one follow-up question on that, because I think it brings up an interesting point of the kind of structure of Hoonuit that's really neat. You have multiple teams, some through acquisition and just also spread across the country, which makes your job very fun because you're managing tech teams that in some cases were on different products and all spread across. How kind of talk about that a little bit. Like how do you motivate and get a team that in some cases may not even know each other right away to kind of band together to create an awesome product that really drives to that North Star?
Yeah, that's definitely been something that's really unique to Hoonuit amongst all the companies that I've worked at. So as you mentioned, we originally, when I joined the company, we had 2 offices, one in Little Falls and one in Appleton, and we were in the process of building a 3rd office in Minneapolis. So we were already remote to begin with, and all of our hiring was a remote first strategy. We were not really focused on finding people at specific locations. It was our focus and our outlook was always to make sure that we're able to attract the best talent regardless of where they're situated, which I will say in hindsight now, given what we're experiencing with COVID and the remote only culture, I think unlike some other companies that have had a little bit of an adjusting period, for us it was probably, for the most part, I would say business as usual since day one, that COVID hit. But anyway, so we were we were in 3 locations before, and had various employees in different parts of the country that were not, in one of those 3 locations. And then we did our first acquisition that was out of Texas, our second acquisition that was out of California, third acquisition that had teams in Portland as well as in Philadelphia. So right before COVID hit, we actually were operating with 7 different locations. And that's just, those locations had concentration of employees, but like I said, or teams, but like I said, we have people all across the country. So to your point about, how do you bring all of this together, both from a personnel perspective as well as from a technology and an infrastructure perspective, definitely has been an exciting challenge, I would say. One of the things that we did, and Nels, I need to thank you officially on the record for helping with our first hackathon at Hoonuit. One of the things that we actually did earlier this year was bring everybody together from all of the different locations to Minneapolis. And it was dead in the winter, but it was great because some of my team members who are based out of California, as an example, who had never seen snow, it was perfect for them. And they actually even had a little bit of a snowball fight, I think. So it was great to bring everybody together for the first time. And the way we organized it was, and I wish we could do this again. And we definitely had plans to do this in the summer, but of course now all of those plans are out the window. But we brought everybody together and we did a hackathon because we figured, instead of just having team building activities that were not really necessarily related to work, I truly believe that our people don't have the luxury to, sit next to each other every day and, do work every day. We don't have the luxury of just, walking across somebody's desk to ask them a question. And so it was really important that we thought of activities that would actually allow people from different companies that have now come together to work on something and create something meaningful. And so that's how we came up with the idea of the hackathon. And we had that, earlier this year. So we, that was just one example of activities, but that's what, when we were able to come together, we would try to do that on a regular basis. And of course, our acquisitions happen at different periods. Our first acquisition happened in April of last year. The second one happened in August, and the third one happened in November. So of course, there was time between those periods, and then, everybody coming together. So that's from a team perspective. And since day one, since I joined the company, we've had a policy of, everybody on Zoom, on video all the time. Every meeting, there's no meeting that happens where people automatically, it's just you don't even need to remind, folks about, turning on their video. It's just a thing that, happened since day one. And of course, having a Zoom conversation is clearly, as we all are now experiencing, is not the same as being in the same room as somebody else. But, little things like that have definitely helped in making sure, that we can get to see each other face to face every day. We get to experience body language, which is important when you're not in the same office. And then, of course, we've had, all sorts of initiatives around rationalizing our technology stack to make sure, that we're integrated from that standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit more about going from a senior product lead to CTO and what that transition was like? Did you know that was going to be your next step, and how did you prepare for it?
Wow, that's a great question. So I'm going to answer the last one first. Did I know that was going to be the next step? I don't know if I could honestly say that I knew that was going to be my next step. I think that's definitely something that I've always aspired for. I've had and I've been really fortunate to have the right kinds of opportunities that helped me progress pretty quickly in my career. One of the things I think that's been inherent in my mode of operation, even as I look back to, my younger self, 15, 20 years ago, I always found it hard to kind of sit in a box because I've always wanted to do more than one thing. And now when I reflect on what I do from a day-to-day standpoint and what I love to do best, and I think that's why I've enjoyed the role that I'm in a lot, is I feel like, I'm best when I'm operating on the business versus in the business, if that makes sense. So, to your question about the transition, at Hoonuit, unlike, a lot of CTO roles, I'm actually responsible for our product strategy, our technology strategy, as well as our implementation teams. So I'm responsible for all three facets of that. So, out of the 105 people, I think, that are at Hoonuit, I have 65 of the 105 on my team. One of the great things I think about, the single accountability structure of having product and engineering, in that single accountability structure is oftentimes, I think, even in my senior product management roles at some of the other companies, no matter how aligned, your product and technology teams are, and of course, this is, my comment is in context of maybe smaller companies, because as you grow, it definitely becomes a little bit more challenging. But even when you're part of a small company, having product and tech segregated, no matter how aligned you are in terms of business objectives, I think still lends itself to some amount of inefficiency, because you're still operating, with a specific agenda, right? From a technology standpoint, you're usually most concerned about infrastructure considerations and scalability and DevOps and security and, those types of things, and from a business perspective, or product perspective, you're constantly focused on, customer value. Everything that I just mentioned on the tech bucket, of course, has a direct implication, or indirect implication, I should say, on customer value, but that's a problem. It's indirect, and so from a product management perspective, you're always focused on pieces that are directly going to impact your customers and or your business. So I think that's probably been my single biggest aha moment. Maybe a little less so about the CTO role versus the senior product role, but more so about just the alignment or the integration of both of those roles in a single accountability structure. And of course, the other broad differences between what I do now versus what I did before, just the breadth of responsibility, of course, is it's incomparable. When you're in, when you're ultimately responsible, and like I often say, the puck stops at me for the most part. There's nobody else to say, okay, somebody else is going to make a decision now. And then, even things like, I think in most tech companies, even today, senior product people typically don't have full P&L responsibility. So those are also different nuances, which are which factor in, which again, I definitely think that they should, but I think in a lot of cases that they don't. So I think those are, some of the broad differences. But I would just say, just breadth of responsibility is clearly, it's incomparable between, the two different roles.
Mm-hmm. Well, one thing that I thought was really, really interesting and neat, going back to that hackathon that I felt very honored to be a part of. So thank you for having me. You ended up bringing on one of your customers, so somebody in the education space who was obviously a very, very big power user and fan. And it kind of helped open my eyes, and I thought really helped highlight to your team that, you're empathetic to your customer, and you really tried to, you work to build and create products that your customers want, and they really kind of help drive that roadmap, which is neat, and you don't always see it. So would you walk us through that process when you're looking at a new feature, when you're thinking about an evolution or a revolution to your product? How do you involve the customer in that process?
Yeah. And thanks for the kind compliments there, Nels. Yeah, it was, we were extremely excited to have the District of Osseo. They've been a customer of ours since, I think they came on board last year, and they've been, they're local here. So it's a great success story for us, which is awesome. So, as far as our product decision-making process, I'm a big believer of not following the guidance of build it and they will come. That is not something that I believe in. I believe that, if there's actually a pain and need for something that somebody wants, you should be able to bring people on board even before the feature of the product is completely baked, because they're so bought into what you're trying to, the vision that you're trying to sell them on, and the value that you can potentially bring to them. And maybe that's become my philosophy, because as you can imagine, when you're a part of small companies, you always don't have the luxury of having all the resources that you need to do all of the things that you want to do. And so having a customer or a group of customers validate and be a part of that process, of course, is I think key to begin with. But in addition to that, if you can actually get them to contribute to that process financially too, because they actually see so much of value in what you're potentially going to build, I think that just is the cherry on the top, because it further validates that there is definitely, there's definitely something there, and you're not just going to build something that's going to be thrown away at the end of the day. So we've been really conscientious of that. We involve our customers in every part of that process, right from ideation. In fact, I would say most of our great ideas don't come from within our four walls. They come from our customers. We have, in addition to the product managers on my team, we have a whole bunch of different customer-facing groups that we're constantly channeling for customer feedback. And one of the other things I would say for anybody else that's listening to this session is, I think one of the best decisions I made in my career was hire, she's now our vice president of education research on my team, but really what her expertise is, she's actually been in every single role of our customers. So she's been a teacher, she's been a principal, she's been a guidance counselor. She would have been a superintendent if we didn't hire her. So we got really lucky over there. And my point for that is, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. I think the expectation, especially in tech, and I can only talk for tech, I guess, because that's the only experience I have, but our expectations usually are, that the product manager is just going to know all of this and figure this out, regardless of whether they've actually been in the shoes of the customer, right? Of whatever industry you're in. And I think that's often hard, no matter how much time somebody spends, if you've not actually been in their shoes. Again, you can probably get 80% of the way there, but truly, if you want to get like 99.9% there, it's hard to do that if you've not been in their shoes. And I think that's what a role like this is so valuable, and a role like this fills in. And that's the role that my vice president of education research plays for us on the team. She's really that, she's constantly in conversation. So she helps drive usage and adoption with our customers. She's constantly in there listening to customers and working with the product teams to make sure that, further what we're building, there's no disconnect between what the customer is saying and what our interpretation of that needs to be. So every stage in the process, right from ideation through, the design thinking process, wireframing, of course, click-throughs, development, all of that process, we're in lockstep with our customers.
So speaking of the customer, how have things changed for them and for the way you guys work since COVID has sprung up on us this year?
Oh my gosh, it's been, as you guys probably are experiencing this, it's been massively disruptive. I would say, of course, a lot more for our customers, and then, that definitely impacts us. If one thing that's been really eye-opening for me being a part of this industry right now is, we often think of education agencies and school districts as places where, we all and our kids go to learn. There's so much more than that, especially as we think about the disparities in socioeconomic status and the safe environments that education agencies offer our communities. It's been eye-opening for me to experience that and to see it as so much more than just a place where you go to learn. For a lot of our kids, especially kids who are homeless, or for kids who have both parents that are working and may not have a place to go to after school, or for kids, who come from low-income families, having a place where they can get fed, where they feel safe, and not only educated, is a big deal. And so, of course, the impact on the 50 million kids in the United States and, of course, worldwide, then because of what's happened with COVID, has been alarming and very saddening to a great extent. Of course, there and because of the economic downturns, there's definitely going to be an impact as we're seeing, with unemployment rates most of the school districts, the way they get their funding is from state. 90% of it comes from state funding, and 90% of that state or most of that state funding comes from income taxes and sales taxes. So as you think about the vicious cycle this is creating for school districts and their funding, it's actually budgets are going to get hit pretty hard. So so I definitely empathize with what they're going through, and of course then all the decisions that they need to make about opening schools, how they're going to open schools, the operation costs that come along with that. If you even just take simple examples of a school bus now with social distancing, on an 83-seater capacity bus, you can only fill it with 13 people if you actually want to maintain 6 feet of distance. So how do you do that economically? So there's so much that that of course this industry needs to figure out. And I just feel thankful every day that we are in a position, we try to be in a position to help them out the best way that we can. One of the key things that they need during this time is, of course, data for all sorts of decision making. That's what we do every day. And so I think what we're going through is definitely unprecedented. And I also want to say that, again, and this is, of course, the beauty of being in tech, with disruption comes opportunity. And we're seeing so many avenues of opportunity for us to innovate and help our customers in terms of, like I said, having the right pieces of information that they didn't need yesterday, but now they do because of how they need to, reopen schools and how they need to adjust to the new normal. So it's definitely presented a lot of opportunity for us, and we're excited and grateful to be a part of that solution.
Can you talk a little bit more about those opportunities that you're finding, what schools are needing, and what technological advances that you're finding could be helpful?
Yeah, definitely. So one of the first things that we did in response to COVID to help our districts and our communities was we offered a meal finder site where we worked with education agencies across the country. And they were able to, they provided us information, about when breakfast, lunch, dinner would be available at various locations. And that could serve as a mechanism for parents and members in the community to go find locations where they could take their kids or even go themselves to get meals. So that was one of the first things that we offered to the community right away. And then, there's various pieces, various parts of our platform that, again, we had not anticipated such need for, but our customers, definitely came up with innovative solutions even before we did. So, customers using our solutions to figure out, we do also, very sophisticated GIS mappings. And so one of the things they did was, school districts did was look at where groups of kids, so whether they were siblings or communities, right? So if they had 4 or 5 different kids in the same building in a specific location, they were able to look at that information on a map. And that's how they figured out how many Wi-Fi devices or hotspots they need to give out, because a group then could share those devices. So they were able to use the platform to make decisions like that. So there was all of these use cases that we didn't even think about in terms of, how folks could use our platform. All of these started coming up. And then from our standpoint, in terms of the work that we're doing right now to help our districts, one of the big pieces of analytics that was not a big part of K-12 before was just learning management systems. They were more so used in higher ed, not necessarily in K-12. Of course, now that everybody had to go to online learning, that became a big need. And so then reporting on that information, right? How much of time is our kids spending in the LMS system? Are they engaged? Are they not engaged? Are they doing their assignments? Are they not doing their assignments? So there's various different pieces of technology that we built to help them with, and are in the process of building to help them with that kind of analysis. And just making it easier to bring in more disparate sorts of data so they can do more efficient analysis and correlations for, as an example, how they need to open schools, and scenario planning.
That's amazing. Good for you and your team. And it's a weird world right now. But I hope you all take a lot of pride in the work that you're doing, because it really is helping to improve the education experience for everyone that uses the platform, which is awesome. Maybe a question to wrap it up, because I know we're hitting time. What are you excited when you think about your team and kind of what you're working on? A lot of it's probably a big question mark. But what are you excited for in the next 6 months to 1 year? What are some fun things that are coming up?
Yeah, Nels, what we're keenly focused on is scaling the platform and growth, so we can provide, one of the key things we want to do, and of course, this was definitely in light of the budget cuts that I alluded to before. One of our goals, even prior to COVID, was making sure that our solution can be as cost effective as possible, so we can make an impact not only to the larger agencies and districts that can that can afford a solution like ours, but also to a small district, because everybody needs data, right? And focusing on the cost effectiveness to provide more tools so it's more self-sufficient, and to bring the cost down and optimize the platform and scale the platform. Those have always been goals of ours, and I think with COVID, that's only expedited the sense of urgency around making that happen even sooner. So there's tons of innovation that's happening on the teams right now, both from an infrastructure perspective as well as from a feature set perspective, as I described, in terms of new innovative solutions that we can provide for the new normal that districts are dealing with, and education agencies are dealing with. And as I mentioned before, it's when you think about education, it's so much more than just academics. It's also the social, emotional well-being of kids and staff. And so every day we're thinking about, how can we make it easier for districts to bring in, they're doing all sorts of different surveys right now, whether that's to capture attendance, because, you cannot do the traditional mechanisms of attendance don't work anymore. So whether it's, surveys for that kind of information, surveys around social emotional learning, and just making sure that kids are feeling safe, especially with all the trauma that's happened over the last few months, whatever that is, making sure that they can bring in all of that data in the platform and effectively report on it, to make better decisions. That's on the forefront. And as you said, there's so much we're working on right now, and I'm sure every day there's new things that we're going to learn. Another big piece that we offer in the platform is health information, health screening, which is a really protected piece of the platform. And again, we're seeing such innovative use cases being presented to us in terms of, and some of it is mandated too. So we're hearing in California, there's going to be mandates around, things like, if X% of kids and staff have been detected with COVID, they need to shut down the schools once, of course, they even reopen it, and then tracking, which kids are in which cohort. So if you were in school during a time period where you were with a specific cohort and somebody in that cohort contracted COVID, that entire cohort is now going to be sent back. Just things like that, new things that nobody had to deal with before, new use cases. So we're in the forefront of innovating with our customers, and I think that's probably going to be the single most exciting piece. And like I said, the single most meaningful thing I think that we can do right now for us and our community.
We're excited to have that innovation in Minnesota. If people want to follow along with you or Hoonuit, where can they go?
Come to our website or social media. We're everywhere. We're on Twitter. We're on LinkedIn. And it's Hoonuit.com. It's pronounced as Hoonuit. It's spelled as Hoonuit. So that's where they can find us.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks so much, Jack. Thanks, Nels.